striking fact about vision is its dynamic range. So that's the range of light levels over which vision operates. It's at least a billionfold and arguably up to 10 billion. In intense sunlight, the brightness, which is measured in candela per metre squared, can exceed 10 to the power 5, whereas in starlight it can be less than 10 to the power minus 4. So you can see our vision operates over 9 orders of magnitude. So how does our visual system achieve this sensitivity, this wide dynamic range? It has several mechanisms, one of which is simply mechanical, the pupillary light reflex. So as you know, in bright light, your pupil closes right down so that there's a very small aperture allowing a very small amount of light in. In dark, dim light, the pupil will open up to allow more light to enter the eye. As you know, you also have the 2 types of photoreceptors, rods and cones, with which you're very familiar. But actually, most of the dynamic range is achieved by gain control, by changes in the photoreceptor sensitivity. In the next plots, you're going to see luminance measured in trolans. That's simply a measure of luminance which corrects for the effect of pupil size. You don't need to know this formula, but I just wanted to explain to you what a trolan is in case you were wondering where it comes from. Okay, so let's say we adapt the retina to one particular luminance, let's say 10 to the power 4 trolans. The cones will respond at some level, let's say about 250, whatever the units are. And now if you give little brief flashes of light that are above or below that luminance, then you will get a lower or a higher response, encoding the luminance of the flash relative to the adapting level. So the cone photoreceptor can very rapidly, instantaneously, give different responses depending on the intensity of light over around 10 to the power 3 intensity levels. So you can see for 10 to the power 3 trolans, it's very much at the bottom of its response, it's really giving no response at all. At 10 to the power 6, it's really saturated and is just giving its maximum response. So beyond those points, it isn't encoding intensity, but in between, it's able to encode the intensity of light. So it has a dynamic range of about 3 log units, so a factor of 1,000. Okay, now suppose we then adapt to a different luminance, say the person goes into a brighter environment, then the cones can adjust their responses more slowly. So if once you've adapted to this luminance, then light here and here will give these respective responses. Do you see? So this 10 to the, 4.5, in this adaptation state would have given quite a strong response. Here it's giving a much weaker response because the cones are now adapted to this higher luminance. And so this slower minute time scale adaptation enables the cones to achieve a much higher dynamic range, so that once you've taken this into account, they can adjust their responses over a range of about 10 to the power 8 intensity levels. This dark adaptation curve shows the change, the dynamic range, which is occurring over a time scale of minutes in cones and then more slowly in rods. So immediately after they've gone in to the dark environment, they can only see the brightest of light flashes. And after they've been there for a couple of minutes, you find that they can see dimmer light flashes, and dimmer and so on over time, as the cones gradually shift their dynamic range towards lower and lower light levels. But by the time you've had about 8 minutes or whatever in the darkness, the cones have really shifted right to the bottom of their dynamic range, and there's not a lot more that they can offer you. But then after around 10 minutes, the rods start coming back online, and so now you can see dimmer and dimmer light flashes as your scotopic or rod-mediated vision begins to function. The rods have been very bleached out in the bright light previously, but now they've recovered and they can mediate your sensitivity to really, really low levels of light here. It's worth pointing out that despite this tremendous dynamic range within which our vision does operate, the displays that we have available offer a very, very small fraction of this range, and they're typically incredibly dark. So the brightness of a typical cinema screen might only be 55 candela per metre squared. An old TV might be 100 candela per metre squared, a modern one might be 500, the very newest ones even up to, for brief periods and in parts of the screen, maybe 1,000 candela per metre squared. But you can see this is really at the bottom of the range our visual system was designed to operate in. So one reason that doesn't matter to us so much is that actually our visual systems don't give us much awareness of the overall luminance. We regularly experience tremendous variations in luminance as, say, I walk out of my relatively dimly lit office into a sunny day. I can see that it's brighter, but I perhaps don't appreciate just how many orders of magnitude brighter it is. We're much more sensitive to relative luminance or contrast. And the reason for this is straightforward. It's that contrast offers much more information about what things are made of. And it's that which we evolved to use vision to find out. That's what's ecologically relevant to us. The actual number of photons coming off a surface is maybe of great interest for physicists, but was typically not of great importance during our evolution. So here's a slightly contrived example, but you can see why under certain circumstances it might be important to distinguish a snowball from a lump of coal. What would it be a good idea to throw at someone without hurting them? What would it be a good idea to put on my fire without having it all go out in a puddle of melted snowball? And you might think, well, I can obviously tell the difference because snowballs are white and lumps of coal are black, so the snowball should be brighter. But of course that depends on what the ambient illumination is. If I'm on an overcast winter day, which let's face it, I probably will be if I can make a snowball, the ambient illumination might only be around 400 lumens. Don't worry about the unit, that's just a unit for describing the brightness of an environment. Now the albedo of a snowball, of snow in general, is around 90%, so it's reflecting 90% of the light that's falling on it. So the brightness of the snowball in my eye is around 360 of these units. On a bright sunny day, the ambient illumination might be around 20,000 lumens. Now the albedo of coal is only around 2%, but even so it's going to be reflecting 400 units of light into my eye. And so this coal is actually objectively going to be brighter in the sense of having more photons coming off it than the snowball. And needless to say, that's completely irrelevant to our visual system. What's important is, if you like, the ratio between these two. So in any given situation, the snowball is always going to be reflecting more photons than the coal. So it's this relative brightness that is much more important in enabling us to tell what things are made of. And therefore, it's this relative brightness, or contrast to be more precise, that our visual system has evolved to encode.